I gave Daniel everything. My heart, my dreams, my devotion. 8 years of marriage, and I thought I knew him completely. Until that night, when he came home with a baby in his arms. Not just any child, his secret lover's baby. Rebecca died in childbirth, he told me, tears in his eyes that I mistook for grief rather than manipulation. The baby has no one else. He didn't ask, he demanded, said it was my duty to raise little Emma as my own. For months, I became a mother to his betrayal, watching him grieve a woman I never knew existed, while I slowly disappeared beneath the weight of his deception. Then, I met James, Daniel's business rival, the man Daniel had always warned me about. But James saw me, really saw me, when I'd become invisible to everyone else. He showed me I deserved more than being the caretaker of my husband's mistakes. When Daniel discovered our connection, he threatened everything. But for once, I stood my ground. "You're choosing him over your family!" Daniel shouted as I packed my bags. "No, Daniel," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "I'm choosing me." The divorce papers felt like freedom in my hands, and when James proposed 6 months later, I realised sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one that chose you. Daniel wanted me to raise his child. He never specified which last name she'd have. I still remember the day we met. I was sitting on a bench in the park, sketching the old oak tree that dominated the landscape. Daniel appeared out of nowhere, his smile warm and inviting as he asked if the seat next to me was taken. "Just my inspiration," I'd replied, not knowing that within a year I'd be walking down the aisle toward him, convinced I'd found my forever. The first few years of our marriage were like a dream. We bought a small house in the suburbs, painted the walls ourselves, and spent weekends planning our future. Daniel worked for a prestigious architectural firm, while I built my interior design business from scratch. We complemented each other perfectly. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, I can see the warning signs that I'd ignored. The late nights at the office that became more frequent. The business trips that grew longer. The way his phone was always face down, password protected. But love makes you blind, and I was completely blind to Daniel's deception. It was a rainy Tuesday night when everything changed. I was working late on a client project when I heard Daniel's key in the lock. Strange. He wasn't supposed to be home from his business trip until tomorrow. When he walked through the door cradling a tiny bundle in his arms, my heart froze. "Daniel?" I stood up slowly from the dining table, my design plans forgotten. "What's that?" His face was pale, eyes rimmed with red. He looked broken in a way I'd never seen before. "This is Emma," he said, his voice cracking. "Rebecca's daughter. Our daughter." The room seemed to tilt. "Rebecca? Who's Rebecca? What are you talking about?" He sank onto the couch, still holding the sleeping infant. "Rebecca was someone I've been seeing for the past 2 years. 2 years. The words hit me like physical blows. 2 years of lies. 2 years of betrayal while I'd been building our life together, completely unaware. She died during childbirth, Daniel continued, tears streaming down his face. There were complications. The doctors couldn't save her. I felt numb, like I was watching this scene unfold from outside my body. And the baby? She has no one else, Daniel said, looking up at me with pleading eyes. Rebecca's parents are dead. She has no siblings, no family. Unlike you, I said coldly. You have a family. Me, your wife. The woman you've been lying to for 2 years. Daniel stood up, still cradling the baby. I know I've made terrible mistakes, Anna, but this innocent child shouldn't suffer for them. What exactly are you asking me, Daniel? I'm asking you... He stopped, correcting himself. I'm telling you that we need to raise her together, as our daughter. I laughed, a hollow sound that scared even me. You're not asking, you're telling. That's the problem with you, Daniel. You've always made decisions for both of us. What choice do I have? He snapped, the baby stirring at his raised voice. Look at her, Anna. She's innocent in all this. Would you rather I abandon her, put her in the system? Is that the kind of woman you are? His words stung. No, I wasn't the kind of woman who would punish an innocent child. And he knew it. He was counting on my compassion, using it against me like he'd used everything else. Fine, I said finally, feeling something inside me harden. I'll help you raise her. But don't mistake this for forgiveness, Daniel. I'm doing this for her, not for you. Relief washed over his face, and it took everything in me not to slap him. Thank you, Anna. You won't regret this. But I already did. The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and a growing coldness between Daniel and me. We moved through our home like ghosts, passing the baby between us, but rarely speaking beyond what was necessary. I threw myself into caring for little Emma, trying to separate my feelings for her from my feelings about how she came to be. Daniel seemed to be grieving Rebecca intensely. I'd catch him staring at photos on his phone, pictures of her I assumed, with tears in his eyes. Once I heard him in Emma's nursery late at night, whispering to her about how much her mother had loved her, how beautiful and kind she had been. I wanted to hate the baby, I really did, but every time I looked into Emma's innocent eyes, I couldn't. She hadn't asked to be born into this mess. She hadn't chosen her parents. So I loved her, fiercely and protectively, even as my love for Daniel withered and died. My friends were split in their reactions. Some thought I was a saint for taking in my husband's love child. Others thought I was a fool. I would have kicked him to the curb the minute he walked in with that baby, my friend Melissa said over coffee one morning while Emma slept in her carrier beside us. I've thought about it, I admitted. But then what happens to Emma? That's not your problem, Melissa insisted. She's not your responsibility. But somehow, she had become my responsibility. In just 3 months, I had become more of a mother to her than I ever thought possible. It was at a charity event for Daniel's firm that I met James for the first time. Daniel had insisted I come, saying it would look bad if his wife wasn't there. We need to present a united front, he'd said, as if our marriage was now just another one of his business strategies. I wore a black dress that night, feeling like I was in mourning for the marriage I'd thought I had. Emma was 6 months old by then, left with a babysitter Daniel had hired, a sweet college student named Lily, who adored the baby. James Peterson was introduced to me as the head of a rival architectural firm. Tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that reached them, he was everything Daniel had warned me about over the years. A shark, Daniel had called him, ruthless, would steal your designs and your soul if you gave him half a chance. But the man who shook my hand that night didn't seem ruthless at all. So, you're the famous Anna, he said warmly, Daniel's lucky wife. I don't feel very lucky these days, I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. James raised an eyebrow. Honesty at a corporate event? How refreshing. We ended up talking for most of the night. He asked about my interior design work, seeming genuinely interested in a way Daniel hadn't been in years. When I mentioned a challenging project I was working on, he offered insights that were actually helpful. You should come by my office sometime, James said as the event was winding down. I think you'd be perfect for a project we're developing. A boutique hotel that needs someone with your eye for detail. I felt Daniel's hand suddenly at my waist, his grip tight. I think my wife is quite busy enough with her current projects, he said coldly, and with our daughter. James looked between us, his expression unreadable. Of course, just a professional thought. Your wife has remarkable talent. I'm well aware of my wife's talents, Daniel replied, guiding me away. Later that night, as we drove home in tense silence, I finally spoke up. That was rude, what you did. What I did? You were flirting with him all night, Daniel accused. I was having a professional conversation with someone who actually seemed interested in my work, I shot back. Something you haven't been in a long time. He's my competitor, Anna. He was just using you to get to me, I laughed bitterly. Not everything is about you, Daniel. The argument escalated when we got home. Daniel accused me of embarrassing him, of not supporting his career. I accused him of hypocrisy, of dictating who I could speak to while he'd been having an affair for years. That's different, he insisted. Rebecca was... If you tell me she was special, I swear I will walk out that door right now, I threatened. He fell silent, and I realised with a sickening clarity that that's exactly what he had been about to say. I'm going to check on Emma, I said, turning away before he could see the tears in my eyes. The next morning, I found James Peterson's business card on the floor of our entryway. It must have fallen out of my clutch. I held it for a long moment before programming his number into my phone. I told myself it was just professional networking, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it was the first step towards something else. Something like freedom. 2 weeks later, I met James for coffee to discuss the hotel project. He was as kind and engaging as I remembered, presenting me with a detailed brief of what they were looking for. This is a huge opportunity, I said, flipping through the materials. Why me? You must know dozens of more established designers. James leaned forward, his gaze direct. Because you see things differently. Your portfolio shows someone who understands that spaces aren't just about aesthetics. They're about how people feel in them. No one had ever described my work that way before, not even Daniel. I took the job, telling Daniel it was too good to pass up. He was furious, accusing me of betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Working with James's team was like stepping into a different world. My ideas were valued. My expertise was respected. And slowly, as the weeks passed, James and I developed a friendship that made me remember what it felt like to be seen. How's Emma? James asked one afternoon as we reviewed fabric samples. I'd mentioned her in passing, not going into the complicated details of her parentage. She's good. Starting to crawl now, gets into everything. You light up when you talk about her, James observed. You must be a wonderful mother. I felt my cheeks flush. I try, it's complicated. Life usually is, he said, not pushing for details I wasn't ready to give. It was another month before I told him the truth. We'd stayed late at the office, finalising designs for the hotel lobby. Takeout containers littered the conference table between us. Can I ask you something personal? James said, setting down his pen. Depends on the question. Are you happy, Anna? The simplicity of the question undid me. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything. About Daniel's affair, about Rebecca's death, about Emma being thrust into my life, about how I'd grown to love this child who came from my husband's betrayal, even as my marriage crumbled around me. James listened without judgment, his expression compassionate. When I finished, he reached across the table and gently took my hand. You are the strongest person I've ever met, he said softly, but you shouldn't have to be this strong. I pulled my hand away, suddenly aware of how this might look. I should go. It's late. James nodded, respecting my boundaries. For what it's worth, Anna, any man who could cheat on you is a fool. That night, I came home to find Daniel waiting up, his expression thunderous. Where were you? He demanded. Lily had to stay late because you couldn't bother to come home on time. I was working, I said, hanging up my coat. The project has a tight deadline. With James Peterson, Daniel spat the name. don't think I don't know what's going on." "Nothing is going on," I said truthfully. "We're colleagues." "I forbid you from working with him anymore," Daniel declared, standing to block my path to the nursery where I wanted to check on Emma. "You forbid me?" I repeated, incredulous. "You lost the right to forbid me from doing anything the moment you brought your mistress's child into our home and expected me to raise her without question." Daniel flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's not fair. You know I had no choice." "We always have choices, Daniel. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. And now I'm choosing to work with whomever I want." I pushed past him to check on Emma, finding her sleeping peacefully in her crib. As I looked down at her angelic face, I realised something that had been building for months. I loved this child, but I couldn't stay in this marriage. Not for her, not for anyone. The next day, I consulted a lawyer. I needed to know where I stood legally with Emma. Could I seek custody? Would I have any rights to her at all? "Legally, she's not yours," the lawyer explained gently. "You didn't adopt her. You have no biological connection. It would be an uphill battle." "But I'm the only mother she knows," I protested. "Daniel is barely involved in her day-to-day care. Document everything," she advised. "Every feeding, every doctor's appointment, every time he chooses not to participate in her care. It won't guarantee anything, but it might help." So, I started keeping detailed records. I took photos of Emma and me together. I saved receipts for everything I bought her. I noted every time Daniel came home late or left early, leaving me to care for her alone. The hotel project wrapped up successfully, earning praise from the client and a feature in a design magazine. James took the team out for a celebration dinner. As everyone else chatted excitedly around us, he leaned over to me. "I have another project I'd like you to consider," he said, "even bigger than this one." "I'm listening." "It's in Chicago, a complete redesign of a historic building being converted into luxury apartments." Chicago. Over 1,000 miles away from Daniel and all the pain associated with him, but also away from Emma. "I can't leave Emma," I said immediately. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I thought you might say that. The project doesn't start for 6 months. A lot can change in that time." He was right about that. A lot did change. 2 weeks later, I came home early from a client meeting to find a strange woman in my house, holding Emma. She looked to be in her 50s, with Daniel's eyes and chin. "Who are you?" I demanded, alarmed. "I'm Catherine," she replied calmly, "Rebecca's mother." My world tilted again. "Rebecca's mother is dead. Daniel told me—" "Daniel lied," she cut me off, "just like he lied to my daughter. I've been in Europe for the past year. I just found out about Rebecca's death and about Emma last week." I sank onto the couch, trying to process this new betrayal. "Why would he lie about that?" Catherine sat beside me, still holding Emma, who was babbling happily, unaware of the tension. "I suspect because he knew I would want to be involved in my granddaughter's life, that I might even seek custody. He couldn't control that narrative if I was in the picture. Control. It always came back to control with Daniel." "How did you find us?" I asked. Rebecca kept a journal. She wrote about Daniel, though not always by name. She suspected he was married, but he convinced her his wife was abusive, that he was working on leaving safely. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "My daughter wasn't perfect, but she wasn't a homewrecker, at least not knowingly." I felt sick. Another woman manipulated by Daniel's lies. When Daniel came home that evening, he froze in the doorway at the sight of Catherine sitting in our living room. Emma was napping upstairs, and I'd spent the afternoon hearing the full story from Rebecca's mother. "Catherine," Daniel said, his voice strangled, "how could you?" She interrupted, rising to her feet. "How could you lie about me being dead? Keep me from my granddaughter." Daniel's eyes darted to me. "Anna, This isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think, I said coldly. You're a pathological liar, Daniel. You lied to me, you lied to Rebecca, and you lied about Catherine because it suited your narrative. I was trying to protect Emma, he insisted. Give her a stable home. By building that home on a foundation of lies? Catherine challenged. The conversation that followed was ugly. Daniel alternated between defending his actions and accusing Catherine and me of ganging up on him. Eventually, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. What will you do now? Catherine asked me after he left. File for divorce, I said without hesitation. I've been considering it for months. This is just the final straw. And Emma? Her voice was tentative. I love her, I said simply, but I know you have more legal right to her than I do. I won't fight you if you want custody. Catherine studied me for a long moment. You're not what I expected, she admitted. Rebecca's journal made it sound like Daniel's wife was a monster, but you're just another victim in all this. Not anymore, I said firmly. I'm done being a victim. Over the next few weeks, Catherine and I developed an unlikely alliance. She didn't immediately seek custody of Emma, instead spending time getting to know her granddaughter while staying at a nearby hotel. We talked about what would be best for Emma, about possibly sharing custody, about creating a family for her that wasn't based on Daniel's manipulation. Daniel, meanwhile, became increasingly erratic. When I told him I was filing for divorce, he alternated between rage and pleading. You can't do this to me, he begged one night. We're a family. We stopped being a family the moment you started lying to me, I replied. I'm done, Daniel. What about Emma? You said you loved her. I do love her, but loving her doesn't mean I have to stay married to you. He grabbed my wrist then, tight enough to bruise. You're not taking her from me. Let go of me, I said evenly, refusing to show fear. You're sleeping with him, aren't you? Daniel hissed. James, that's what this is really about. I yanked my arm free. This is about you and your lies. No one else. But as the weeks passed and the divorce proceedings began, James did become a larger part of my life. What started as professional admiration had grown into friendship and now was blossoming into something more. He never pushed, never pressured, simply offered support when I needed it most. The Chicago project is still yours if you want it, he told me over dinner one evening. Catherine was watching Emma, an arrangement that had become increasingly common. I've been thinking about it, I admitted, but everything's so complicated with Emma. What would make it less complicated? He asked. In an ideal world? I considered the question seriously. Legal rights, some form of shared custody between me and Catherine, a clean break from Daniel. James nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered adoption? If Catherine agreed and Daniel is stripped of parental rights due to his deception, would that even be possible? With the right lawyer and Catherine's support, maybe. He reached across the table for my hand. Anna, I know this isn't the time to complicate things further, but I need to be honest with you. My feelings for you have grown far beyond friendship or professional admiration. My heart raced. James, you don't need to say anything, he assured me quickly. I know you're going through a divorce. I know Emma is your priority. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. The sincerity in his eyes nearly undid me. After years of Daniel's manipulation, James's straightforward honesty was like oxygen to a drowning woman. 2 days later, my lawyer called with news that changed everything. Daniel had been having affairs with multiple women, not just Rebecca. One of them had come forward with emails proving he had promised to leave me for her years ago. Emails that clearly showed his intent to defraud me in the divorce by hiding assets. This changes the entire calculation, my lawyer explained excitedly. With evidence of this level of deception, we can push for a more favourable settlement. And, given his pattern of lies, it strengthens your case regarding Emma as well. When I confronted Daniel with this information, his face went ashen. For once, he had no clever lies, no manipulations to fall back on. The truth always comes out eventually, I told him quietly. All your careful deceptions, all your control, it was always going to crumble, Daniel. What do you want? He asked dully. A clean divorce? A fair division of assets? And shared custody of Emma between me and Catherine? And if I refuse, then we go to court. Every lie gets exposed. Every woman you manipulated gets to testify. Your reputation, your career, they won't survive it. He laughed bitterly. You've changed, Anna. You used to be so sweet, so trusting. I grew up, I replied. Thanks to you. In the end, Daniel agreed to my terms. The divorce was finalised within months. Catherine and I worked out a custody arrangement for Emma that we then formalised through the courts. Daniel was granted limited visitation rights, supervised by Catherine or me. James waited patiently throughout all of it, never pressuring me, always supporting from the sidelines. When the dust finally settled, he asked me to dinner to celebrate my fresh start. I have something for you, he said, sliding a small box across the table. Inside wasn't jewellery as I'd half expected, but a key. What's this? The key to your new office in Chicago, he explained. If you're still interested in the project, no strings attached. If you say no, I'll understand completely. I turned the key over in my hand, thinking about all it represented. A new city, a new beginning, a chance to build something on my own terms. What about Emma? I asked. Catherine and I have shared custody. I spoke with Catherine already, James admitted. She's considering relocating to Chicago too. Her work is remote, and she has no ties keeping her here. She thought it might be good for Emma to have a fresh start away from all the complications. I stared at him in amazement. You arranged all this? I just had conversations, he clarified. The decisions are still entirely up to you and Catherine. I would never presume to make them for you. The contrast with Daniel couldn't have been clearer. Where Daniel had manipulated and controlled, James offered choices and respect. 6 months later, I was settled in Chicago. Emma, now nearly 2, split her time between my apartment and Catherine's condo a few blocks away. My work on the historic building project was being praised in design circles, and James and I were building something precious and real, founded on honesty and mutual respect. When he proposed a year after my divorce was finalised, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Daniel came to Chicago once to see Emma. He seemed diminished somehow, less sure of himself. As he was leaving, he paused to look around my bright, airy apartment with its view of the lake. You seem happy, he said, sounding genuinely surprised. I am happy, I confirmed. With James, he added, a question in his voice. With myself, I corrected. James is part of that happiness, but he's not the source of it. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Perhaps for the first time, he was seeing me clearly, not as an extension of himself or a pawn in his games, but as a whole person with my own strengths and desires. You're raising my daughter with my rival, he said finally, a hint of his old bitterness creeping in. I smiled, watching Emma play contentedly with her blocks on the floor. You wanted me to raise your child, Daniel. You never specified which last name she'd have. Emma is 4 now. She calls me Mama and Catherine Nana. She has James's last name, a decision that was legally formalised when he adopted her last year with us, Catherine's blessing. She knows Daniel as her birth father, who visits occasionally, but James is Daddy, the man who reads her bedtime stories, who taught her to ride a bike, who loves her as fiercely as if she were his biological child. Sometimes I think about that night when Daniel walked through the door with Emma in his arms, thinking he could force me into the role he'd designed for me. He never imagined that his betrayal would lead me to true happiness, to a family built on choice rather than obligation. Daniel wanted me to raise his child. Now I'm raising her with a man who shows her daily what respect and honest love look like. I'd call that the best revenge, except it doesn't feel like revenge at all. It feels like justice, it feels like peace, it feels like love.